Hi, Allie. I am a vintage and antique doll dealer, collector, researcher, published author, public speaker, and more. And I am so excited to once again be to be selling at and presenting for the second time at this wonderful doll show. I would like to take you on a journey through the fascinating world of boudoir dolls. The boudoir dolls are actually descended from tea cozy dolls made in Russia in the 1800s. And I have two tea cozy dolls that I was going to bring today, but one of them just sold, and she was the later one. But the other one is from the Russian Imperial Court, probably, and she wasn't able to come, unfortunately, because I need to conserve her dress. It is a little fragile, and her beads, beadwork, and everything. So I will try to explain about Russian tea cozies as best as I can, and how they became boudoir dolls in Paris in the 1920s.
Oh,
So,
come on in. You can come in.
oh,
All right, yeah, just keep talking.
okay, that's fine. So, oh,
It's okay.
oh, go on. So, they were very popular in Russia, and probably in other countries as well, but they were very popular in Russia to set on top of your teapot. They had a quilted petticoat underneath without legs. They did not have any legs, and they sat on top of the teapot to keep it warm. Some were more insulated than others, but the main thing was they had very full skirts, and they actually sat on something, but where it looked like they were standing. Now, during the Russian Revolution of 1917, the exiled Russians mostly went to Paris. One of them was the fashion designer Paul Boudoir. I don't exactly know how to say his name, but he's the one that invented the hobble skirt, which is the tight 1910 skirt. But him or one of his Russian aristocrat friends had a tea cozy. This whole legend, the whole lore of tea cozy is steeped in mystery. But he was inspired. He was a fashion designer, but he also worked for a ballet company, but he was making furniture at that time, and he wanted to put something on the furniture to make it stand out, like silken couches. And he came up with the idea of setting a tea cozy on a couch to see what they would look like. Well, the idea caught on. His friends started making cottage industry style cloth boudoir dolls, but at this point in time, they were mostly just made for the parlor, or for the parlor and for mostly couches and such. So eventually, very gradually, they morphed into being just for the 1920s Parisian boudoir, the bedroom, but they were still everywhere. You could have quite a few of them, one on the dresser, one on the bed, and one on like a chair and a couch in the room, different things like that as well. From there, this is just a quick little history. From these kind were mostly cloth. They were mostly cloth made by English companies such as Dean's Ragbook and Dean's Ragbook,
Hello.
Wellings, Chad Valley, and also
Join
Lexi
us.
made that mostly felt boudoirs. But there were also some French composition companies that were experimenting with the idea, such as the company that made this lovely lady here.
Those were people.
Gradually, this shift, I say gradually because the shift was quite gradual. They gradually turned into more of just a bed decoration. And when they did, they became more of a lady version of, the little dress. Raise your hands if anyone here knows about the little 50s hard plastic dress-me-downs. So, quite a few. And that's because the dress-me-dolls were the boudoir dolls during that time were like the lady and of course the taller, longer lady version of little dress-me-dolls. And they turned into more of an object for sewing and just to sit, to look at, to sit on like mostly guest bedrooms to show off fine, detailed stitches and fabrics. So more of a sewing skill type thing. So gradually, they started morphing more into pajama bags. I actually have a little 50s pajama bag doll. And they started turning more into like pajama bags for little girls at like sleepovers in the 1950s. But they were made of different materials at the time. All the ones I have here that are sitting on the couches are composition. But there were also during that time, there were also hard plastic ones and vinyl ones as well. Also, however, they weren't very common, and they were almost more of an obscure novelty item versus necessarily the staple of the culture. So, this is a early 1970s version. I'm not exactly sure if she was made to be a boudoir doll or not, but I'll just say bed doll because I can't pronounce it all the way. But I'm not sure if she was actually made to be a bed doll, but she was my Aunt Tina's doll. She used to very secretly put her bank, my mommy told me, put her bank under her skirt. So more of a dresser doll, but still. The interesting thing is, she has just ruffles, more towards, when she sits down, she doesn't sit on the ruffles. It's a very smart way, it's a very smart way to make the doll so that they can sit better. So I do think she was made to be that. As an overview of the history, I don't think that boudoir dolls, like I said, they gradually phased out, but these are some lovely examples, and I will go through each example, starting with, and talk about them more in full, starting with my first one, who's also my personal one that I set on my dresser. She is, as well as these two here, are 1930s to 40s composition ones. They have the same face, but painted very differently. They give off completely different looks. It's also hard to tell what era she's supposed to represent. You see, if you really think about it, was based on childhood fantasies of the people living during that time. So, for instance, for instance, they thought of for instance, the early 1900s as the time to be alive for children, as far as dress-wise and the hair and everything. And they even had parties, and of course the dolls.
Charlie.
And they even had parties during that time where they dressed up in their drop waist dresses, which is actually the drop waist style dress of the 20s is actually was actually derived from childhood, early 1900s dresses, blouse and waist dresses. Anyways, so they really had different things like that. And that is actually the ideals behind the 1920s being such the time that it was all based on childhood. So I thought that was really, really neat when I learned that. And that is where the idea of boudoir dolls came from. It's also, not only is that ideal, that's the one idea. The other ideal is just past eras in general. So of course, a lady in 1940 was definitely not a child in the 1700s. But it was also just the era that the lady that had the doll liked, and what they, how they thought of themselves in the world was reflected in the boudoir dolls that they chose. So, for example, even with the tea cozies, that is an example. It makes sense that they symbolize lost world, lost generations, lost era. Even the lost generation is actually a term that people call the 20s. The 20s was called the lost generation, but that's because they were interested and they were very invested in the lost generation, especially of the early 1900s and 1910s, and so that's why that is what they symbolize, because of possibly the Russian teachers that inspired them. Now, of course, these are many different ones here, but before I go over and overview each one, I'm going to quickly show one other example. There were also cases of not only having parties where they acted innocent, childish, but also carrying their dolls around at parties. And sometimes there are pictures, I'm sure some of you have saw different pictures of celebrities with their boudoir dolls and such, but there were also a lot of them usually actually in their boudoir or on set or something, but there were actually a lot of them that they just carried around. They carried them around so they were almost like the ladies played them. They played with them like they played with the dolls that they had when they were little. And think about this, the 20-year-olds in 1920 were born in 1900, so their childhood was around 1905 to 1910ish. So that is an example. Anyways, this. So I'm just kind of.
I'm sure she'll be up in just a minute.
This mostly did it with cloth ones, but the cloth ones were pretty expensive. I mean, lenses are expensive now, but they were also expensive back then too. So cloth, so composition ones might have been a little less expensive because no one even knows the name of the companies that made these guys. I mean, my personal one has a marking on the back of your neck. And I can kind of read it. It says something like MK something, but if I tried to research it, you can't find any information because they didn't think of them. I don't even know if the companies that made them actually usually made dolls. They might have just made boudoir dolls, so you wouldn't find them in like the history of books about dolls and such. Anyways, speaking of the companies, a lot of these dolls were made as kits. That means their bodies are homemade too. So there was so they came in kits. Probably wondering why I have this one here. Here's an unpainted example, probably from the 20s, 30s. I believe, and raise your hand if anyone else agrees, that she is the smaller, unpainted version of this one. I think she has the same face. But I'm not sure if this one was supposed to have eyelashes or not, but she's still pretty close. They came in kits with this, the bust portion, the arms, different length arms. Usually the arms ended to about here, but sometimes they went even farther, and sometimes they're just little forearms. And also with the legs, which have molded high heels. So that's a little bit about how they were made, but also about how they were sold. Either, probably, some of them probably were sold complete, like this one was probably sold complete, but some were probably also sold as kits with the homemade bodies, and homemade clothes, or just recostumed. Now the interesting thing is, most play dolls, especially during this time, had removable clothes. So you may be wondering, well, boudoir dolls were a lady's play doll. Did they have removable clothes? The thing is, they didn't. They did not always have removable clothes. This outfit was proudly made at home, and it doesn't come off, but she may have had a wardrobe at one time that had other dresses that could be changed, but mostly their clothes did not come off. They were stapled on, and that's actually where I got my comparison. It's where I gathered my comparison with dress-me dolls, because their clothes are stapled on, nailed on, pinned on. Yeah, I even saw one with nailed on. But just like dress-me dolls. So anyway,